It's only June, but that means we're only 2 months away from our drafts, and it's never too early to look at who we like, who we dislike, especially in the later rounds, as it's easy to have a good start to your draft, but can you finish it? Can you grab those sleepers at the end to put your team over the top? Today we're going to talk about the guys you want to avoid based off of consensus ADP. But before we get into that, if you enjoy the channel at any point, please support us down below, whether if you just like or just subscribe to the channel. It all goes a very long way. We're on the road to 500 subscribers on the channel. We're growing at a rapid pace, and we can't thank you guys enough, right? And of course, we can't get to that milestone without you guys. So support us down below if you like what you hear or what you see. And without further ado, let's get into round 9. We're going to start here in round 9 as you see a guy like Jameson Williams, Samaje Perine, and Juju Smith-Schuster all with green boxes around their names. And if you're new around here, that just narrows it down to my top 3 in each and every round. So for this video, the guys with the green boxes are going to be guys I don't like, right, to draft, at least in their rounds, right? Based off consensus ADP doesn't mean I don't like these guys. It just means that in this round, I would prefer to go a different route. Right, for Jameson Williams, I mean, he's going to miss 6 games this year. When he comes back, he's going to need 2 or 3 weeks to get back in game shape. There's no guarantee this year, at least for fantasy football, that he's going to be relevant for us managers this year, right? For Dynasty, that's a different conversation, but for redraft leagues, there's not a guarantee he will be relevant for us fantasy players. Samaje Perine, a very interesting early season option, as we don't know when Javonte will be back, if it's going to be from the beginning of the year, from the midseason mark. But when Javonte's back, I could see Samaje Perine having very limited work, right, unless he goes crazy early on. And I don't want to bet on a back that is really a third down guy, right? And we haven't really seen Samaje Perine be a 3-down back, and that's kind of what he's slated to be there in Denver. But we're going to talk about Juju Smith-Schuster. He's a guy I want to go more into depth about, and he had a very solid year last year, right, in Kansas City, in one of the best offenses in the NFL, as we all know. But it wasn't an amazing year, right? He was the wide receiver 35 last year, and right now his ability to beat zone coverage is really all he can do nowadays, right? So, and I believe going from Kansas City to New England's a team that has a lot of safer passing plays, and Juju Smith can fit right in like a glove in that aspect where he can beat zone coverage. And he's going to be their new Jacoby Myers, right, is a way to put it, as a starter in this offense. But other than that, I don't love the passing upside of this New England offense, and I'm good with not drafting Juju Smith this year. I'm okay with passing on having any stock in Juju this year due to the passing upside of the New England offense. And just in short, if it's not Ramondre Stevenson, I really don't want any part of the New England offense unless it's like a Pierre Strong late in the draft. But I'll pass on Juju this year. Solid receiver. He might be a wide receiver 4 or 5 for your team. But there's just not a lot of upside there for me in round 9, right? But moving over to round 10, you see guys like Brian Robinson and Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers, there's no guarantee that he will have the same passing production he did, 2 years ago with New England with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I will say there was familiarity there with Josh McDaniels, and I think that's a big reason why he went there. But this offense, I don't see Josh McDaniels producing 2 or 3 very fantasy relevant receivers, not to mention Josh Jacobs also gets a lot of passing work. We'll have to see, but I'm going to pass on Jacoby Myers. Maybe in like round 12 or so, I would entertain the idea. But Brian Robinson, a guy who I had on one of my teams last year. He actually helped me a lot last year. It's just the worry that with Eric Bieniemy coming over from Kansas City, he's going to implement a lot more passing work for his running backs, and Antonio Gibson is going to be the reaper of that, right? And it won't be Brian Robinson, right? Which he's going to be more of a runner, right? Quite literally inside the red zone and outside of the red zone. There's not a lot of passing upside there, receiving work for Brian Robinson, and that's the only reason I dislike him here. Again, maybe in like round 12, I would entertain the idea of a Brian Robinson in 2023. But I want to go more in depth about Damian Harris. Last season, he was plagued by injuries. Let's not forget he played in only 11 games, in 2 of which he left early. But in those 9 healthy games last year, he only averaged about 8.5 fantasy points a game, only about 49 rushing yards a game. He took a major backseat last year to Ramondre Stevenson, and he's now going to a division foe. He's going to the Buffalo Bills. That is a pass-first offense. There's a committee of running backs with Nyheim Hines and James Cook, who's looking to take a step up this year. Buffalo has an outside shot of grabbing James Cook's brother, right, in Dalvin Cook. So there's a committee of running backs here, and maybe you can say that as of right now, Damian Harris is their only back with some size, so he could be the one that gets the goal line touches. But Josh Allen seems to get a lot of those goal line touches anyway, right? So you're really banking on a running back that realistically is going to get 2 touchdowns this year to get 8 or 9 in round 10, which if you believe that he can get all of those red zone touches, go after it, right? But for me, I think there's just other options that I would rather go in round 10 of my draft than Damian Harris. Moving over to round 11, you see guys like Rashee Rice and Sky Moore, 2 young receivers there in Kansas City. Basically, the argument there is that, there's not a lot of younger receivers that flourish in the Kansas City offense. Sky Moore had a lot of hype behind him coming into last year, and he didn't perform to the levels we thought he would. Rashee Rice is the same thing. He's coming over from SMU, and he has a lot of the same hype Sky Moore did coming into last year. And it's just, there's not a guarantee these guys will perform in a high-powered offense like that, especially because Kelsey is still slated for another year. He's probably going to have 120-plus catches. But I'm going to play it safe here. I'm going to dive more into Jonathan Mingo. And this is going to start my hate of rookie players, right, in redraft formats, which I'm going to say this. It's not true, right? I love rookies, but I just like the good ones, right? I like the ones that are good value. And Jonathan Mingo in round 11 for me is just a little bit too pricey. A guy that last year at Ole Miss, he had 51 receptions, 860 yards, and 5 touchdowns in the SEC, which is very impressive, right? Mingo is going to the Panthers as a 6'2", 220-pound wide receiver who has averaged 100 receiving yards a game, right? For multiple stretches of time. But he's joining an offense in Carolina that has a new head coach, a new quarterback, with 4 to 5 other competent wide receivers. It's hard to imagine that in year 1, Jonathan Mingo is going to have at least a decent role here in Carolina, but his intangibles are there, right? His intangibles are there. He has great speed, everything you want on paper. I guess that's something, right? But for me, I'm going to pass on him in round 11, maybe a late round flyer there in case somebody gets hurt, like Adam Thielen, right? Moving over to round 12, you see guys like Kendre Miller. I know I mispronounced that name, but stick with me here. There's another guy like Kyler Murray. The only reason I have Kyler Murray is because if he is going to be out for the majority of the year, let's say it's 10 weeks, he's still going to need 2 or 3 weeks to get his feet back under him, get back in game shape, get comfortable again on a football field, right? So Kyler Murray is just a guy that you would be picking up basically for the fantasy football playoffs. And I just don't think that he can immediately go to an offense that just lost their best receiver and has a new head coach, right? So he's going to have to get used to the new scheme as well and be fantasy relevant, right? I mean, it's always a chance. He's a special player, but I'm going to pass, right, at least in 2023. But I want to dive more into Jalen Hyatt. As I said, these young wide receivers, I know they're the new shiny toys that everybody wants to grab, but let me just show you why I would prefer not to go in Jalen Hyatt's direction. And this to me, he's the next Will Fuller, maybe with a little bit more potential. But Jalen Hyatt, he broke out in a massive way in 2022 at Tennessee. He had about 70 receptions for 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns. An absolutely insane year, right? But after an injury-plagued sophomore year, which was 2 years ago, last year he had that monster year with the stats that I just read off to you. All-American honors, everything you wanted in a junior receiver. It makes a lot of sense why he declared for the draft. But I will say he's only 175 pounds or so he's got a slender frame. He's going to need to put some size on, but he's also going to be in an offense that isn't very pass-focused. And sure, I can see him having some spike weeks where everybody rushes to pick him up after the week. When he puts up one catch for 70 yards and a touchdown, right, where he puts up 14 to 15 points, and everyone's like, man, let me go get a piece of that. But they don't realize he's going to have those deep post routes, those deep streaks where he's going to catch it and just has that one-play touchdown ability. maybe I'm just not a believer in rookie wide receivers. Maybe I'm just not a believer in Daniel Jones. But I'm staying away from a round 12 draft price from a guy that is going to be a later day Deshaun Jackson in year one of his career. But moving over to round 13, where you see guys like Raheem Mostert, who could be the number one in Miami, or Sam Laporta, which was a day two pick for the Detroit Lions at the tight end position. Those guys I have questions about just because Raheem Mostert can never stay healthy. Sam Laporta is a rookie. There's no guarantee he gets any production this year. But Roschon Johnson, another rookie running back here, and he was the backup for Bijan Robinson there in Texas, and he would have been a starter anywhere else, right? But he chose to stay at Texas and just have a dynamic duo in the backfield. But this is a guy that in 47 career games at Texas, he only started 5 of them. And to be fair, like we mentioned, he was Bijan's backup, but Johnson has the size, right? He has the prototypical size that you want in a running back, 6 foot, 220 pounds. He could be a bell cow back. His situation to me is just very tricky and very off-putting, right? There's 2 veteran backs in Deontay Foreman and Khalil Herbert in the Chicago backfield. There's a committee there, right, with the 3 of them, as well as Justin Fields, who's going to take plenty of work away on his own, right? This is just another rookie who is just a year away from greatness or opportunity for me, and I'm going to stay away from Roschon in round 13. But moving over to round 14, Deontay Foreman I just talked about. Jaden Reed is a very interesting receiver that is growing on me a little bit there in Green Bay, but how much do you believe in Jordan Love? That's the question you have to ask yourself when drafting any Green Bay player, most notably Christian Watson, right? But how much do you believe in Jordan Love? For me, though, I want to dive into Tank Bigsby. This is a guy who walked into Auburn, and he won the starting job. He took over the starting job as a freshman, right? You never see that, especially in the SEC, right, unless you play for Vanderbilt. But he was drafted by the Jags this year on day 2 of the NFL Draft, and he's going to compete for the backup job for Travis Etienne, right, or behind Travis Etienne, rather. But the head coach, Doug Peterson, he's spoken all offseason about building a deep running back room, building a committee behind Etienne. So, the selection made sense. The landing spot made sense. But I think Tank Bigsby, if I can talk, he's just a year away from at least a decent role, right? And unless Etienne gets hurt, I don't see the appeal of a round 14 selection, even though he's a rookie. Round 15, you see guys like Chase Brown, Tajay Spears. But I'm going to go with Marvin Mims, a Cincinnati wideout, or a Denver wideout, excuse me, but he is a standout from Oklahoma, and Sean Payton traded up in the second round of the draft to get Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. This is a guy that has the speed with a 4.3 speed to take the top off the defenses. He can also play above the rim, out jump you, get those 50-50 balls, and come up with many fantasy relevant plays. But Mims, to me, is going to be set to be the wide receiver 4 at best in this offense, maybe wide receiver 3. But he's going to be behind Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, all fantasy-relevant wide receivers. So he's going to be the wide receiver 4, maybe wide receiver 5 in this offense. And that's not good for redraft leagues, right? Maybe Jerry Jeudy is gone after this next year. And maybe Tim Patrick being a year older, lets Marvin Mims take that step and puts him in a spot where he can be the wide receiver 2 next year, or wide receiver 1 if he goes crazy next offseason, and be very fantasy relevant in Denver next year. But for this season coming up, I don't see the appeal, right? Even in round 15. In round 16, Kenneth Gainwell, a guy who's backing up DeAndre Swift now, new running back there in Philly, who's not the most durable, but Kenneth Gainwell, there's no guarantee, right? Curtis Samuel is another guy that we're going to dive into here in a sec, but Tyquan Thornton is a guy that, he has all the tools and he has all the speed, all the flashy things you want in a receiver, but there's no guarantee, especially in an offense in New England, like I said, I want no part of if it's not Ramondre Stevenson. But Curtis Samuel's a guy I want to dive into, and this might be a surprise, right? But I wanted to get away from the young guns. I wanted to go with a veteran guy here to close the list, as we pretty much hammered all the rookies possibly in these late rounds. But it's the same argument I had with Scary Terry last week, right? Last Friday. You're relying on an unproven second-year guy at quarterback with 1 game of NFL experience, which he left early, by the way. It's not the smartest way to go, right? But if you believe in Sam Howell, who is going to be the quarterback here for Washington in 2023, if Sam Howell turns out to be decent, this might be a stupid pick for the last round of your drafts. This might not be a stupid pick for the last round of your draft, excuse me. But I'm willing to bet that Sam Howell can't make 3 different wide receivers in an offense fantasy relevant. That is Terry McLaurin, that is Jahan Dotson, and that is Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel already was kind of out of the door last year, but he didn't get traded, and now he's on a contract year. Best case scenario, I see a wide receiver 4 for Curtis Samuel, but it's just he's such a boomer bust player, and then you add a rookie quarterback basically to the mix. It's just not a good mix, right? Especially in round 16 of your drafts. I'd rather go with another route like a Michael Mayer, CJ Stroud, even John Mechie. Get a guy that has upside, right, in 2023. But just to recap here before we get out of here, basically this list was hammering rookie wide receivers, or just rookie players coming into 2023. But Juju Smith we started off with in round 9. Then it went Damian Harris, Jonathan Mingo, Jalen Hyatt, Roshan Johnson, Tank Bigsby, Marvin Mims, and Curtis Samuel. So a lot of guys that seem obvious, right? But it's late in these rounds that you might get desperate, or you might be like, I don't have a young guy. Let me go take a shot. Some of these guys just aren't even worth that shot, right? Late in your drafts. But without further ado, before we get out of here, we are on the road to 500 subscribers on the channel. So if you enjoyed what you saw or what you heard, please support us down below. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, share the podcast, as you guys are obviously doing that because we're growing at such rapid pace. But I can't thank you guys enough for all the support. And we'll be back next Tuesday for another week with 4 great episodes on the channel. Always, on this channel, we're gonna have 2 fantasy, 2 sports. So 4 times a week we're grinding here, and we appreciate any and all support. But until Tuesday, have a great weekend and stay happy, stay healthy. We're out.